Hi everybody, Jacob Reed here from ReviewEcon.com. Today we're going to be looking at monopolies. If after watching this video you still need a little more help, head over to ReviewEcon.com and pick up the Total Review booklet. It has everything you need to know to ace your microeconomics or macroeconomics exams. Let's get into the content. First thing we're going to do is go over some of the qualities of a monopoly. A monopoly is a market structure with just one seller, one single firm in the entire market. Second thing is that there are going to be extremely high barriers to entry. A barrier to entry is anything that makes it difficult, or impossible in this case, for a new firm to enter the market and compete with the other firm that is already there. The third quality is that the product is going to be unique. That means there are no close substitutes within this market that can take some of this firm's market share. And since there are no close substitutes, this firm will have some influence on the price they charge for their product. That means this firm, rather than being a price taker like a perfectly competitive firm, this firm will be a price seeker or price maker, as some people call it. Now, of course, even a monopoly can't charge whatever price they want. They will still be bound by the demand curve for the product that they sell. So if we take a look at the demand curve for a typical monopoly, we will see that it's downward sloping. That means as the firm produces more output, it is going to have to lower the price for each additional unit. So at low quantities, we're going to have a high price, and as higher quantities are produced, that price is going to fall. If we take a look at that demand curve in table form, we will see that as the quantity increases, the price of the product is going to fall in order to sell the higher quantities of output. That means, based on these numbers, at the quantity of 1 unit of output, we will see a price of $10 charged for that product. That gives us a total revenue of $10. The $10 price times the 1 unit of output. That's our total revenue. But if that firm produces more output, it's going to have to lower the price to sell the additional unit of output. In this case, 2 units of output will only sell for $9 each. That means the total revenue is $18, and the marginal revenue, the change in the total revenue, is now lower than the price. It's now $8 when the price was $9. And that's because as the firm produces more units of output, it has to lower the price on all units produced, not just that last unit produced. And so our demand curve is those first 2 columns, the quantities and the price. Our marginal revenue curve is going to be those 2 columns, the quantity and the marginal revenue. That's the change in the total revenue for every unit produced. And when we put it on the graph, the marginal revenue is going to be below the demand curve. And that's because the marginal revenue is going to fall faster than the price of the product. Keep in mind that the marginal revenue curve is going to be below the demand curve because this is a single price monopoly. Unless otherwise specified, you can assume on the AP microeconomics exam that a monopoly is a single price monopoly. That means they charge everybody the same price for their product. There is no price discrimination. You'll see a perfect price discriminating monopoly in another video moving forward. Another thing to keep in mind is that the demand is also the average revenue and the price. That's why we see it D equals AR equals P, or DARP, as some people call it. And when we look at that marginal revenue curve below the demand curve, we can identify, as you may have learned in a previous unit, the elastic range, the unit elastic point, and the inelastic range on the demand curve above that marginal revenue curve. As long as the marginal revenue is positive, we will see that region there is the elastic range, because as the price is falling, the marginal revenue is positive. That means total revenue is rising. Where marginal revenue is 0, that is where the unit elastic point of the demand curve above is found. And that's because as the price is falling, the marginal revenue is 0, and that means total revenue doesn't change with that decrease in price. And finally, as we increase output further, we see that marginal revenue is negative, and that means total revenue is decreasing as the price decreases. Since they're going in the same direction, this is the inelastic range of that demand curve. When it comes to the graph of a single price monopoly, it's important that you know exactly how to draw it. Here you're going to start off with your axes. X-axis is quantity and the Y-axis is price. Throw in that demand curve, it's equal to the average revenue and the price, it's downward sloping. Then you're going to add in the marginal revenue curve. It is found below the demand curve because as this firm produces more units of output, it has to lower the price on all units produced. And that causes the marginal revenue to fall faster than the price. And now we're going to add in that marginal cost curve. It looks like a Nike swoosh. The next thing we're going to do is find the profit maximizing quantity. That is where marginal revenue equals marginal cost. It is where that marginal revenue curve intersects that marginal cost curve, drop down below, and that gives you the quantity that this firm, profit maximizing firm, will produce. Now, the price this firm charges is not there at that intersection. It is all the way up at the demand curve. And that's because the demand curve shows consumers' willingness to pay for a product. So they price all the way up at the demand curve because firms will charge as much as they can for the quantity they've produced. And since we're currently going to draw a monopoly making an economic profit, we need to have the average total cost curve below that point right there where the quantity hits that demand curve. Let's go ahead and draw in that ATC. Remember, the minimum point of that average total cost curve must intersect the marginal cost. And since at that profit maximizing quantity, the average total cost curve is less than the demand curve, that means we have economic profit here. And you can find that profit box by going from the quantity that's being produced all the way up until you hit that average total cost curve. Keep going till you hit the demand curve. Those 2 points headed over to the axis, and that gives you your profit box. You'll notice that the profit box is a rectangle there. It's got distinct sides and 90-degree angle corners. And since a monopoly has high barriers to entry, that means it's impossible for new firms to enter this market and compete with this monopoly. This firm will earn economic profits in the long run. Now, if you were asked to draw a monopoly earning zero economic profit or breaking even, remember that's a normal profit, they're covering their opportunity costs, then you would make sure that the average total cost curve was tangent to the demand curve at the profit maximizing quantity. And here, since the average total cost equals the price at the profit maximizing quantity, this firm is earning zero economic profit. If instead we drew that ATC a little higher, now we would have economic losses because at that profit maximizing quantity, the average total cost is greater than the price. And that means economic losses. Remember, when you draw in that average total cost curve, even with an economic loss, the minimum of that average total cost curve still intersects the marginal cost curve. And you can find those economic losses by going up from that profit maximizing quantity all the way up till you hit the price, the demand curve, and then keep on going until you hit the average total cost. Go straight on over to the price axis there at that point, and that gives you a rectangle of economic losses. And you should definitely practice drawing all three of these graphs before your next exam: economic profit, breaking even, and economic loss. Next thing we're going to talk about is efficiency in regards to a monopoly. One of the things that a monopoly does have going for it is it can capture economies of scale at the profit maximizing quantity. Since that average total cost curve is downward sloping at the profit maximizing quantity, it could increase output and continue to lower the average cost of production. That means this firm is experiencing economies of scale. Now, since a single price monopoly is going to price higher than the marginal cost, it is not going to be allocatively efficient. The allocatively efficient quantity is found where the demand curve equals the marginal cost. This firm is underproducing and as a result is going to have deadweight loss. If there are numbers here, you could definitely calculate the area of that deadweight loss to find the value. Next, we're going to compare a monopoly to a perfectly competitive market. Here is your perfectly competitive market that you learned about in Unit 2 for AP Microeconomics. We have our equilibrium price and equilibrium quantity marked PE and QE. If we want to turn this market into a monopoly where there's just one firm for the entire market, that supply curve will be the firm's marginal cost curve. Remember, the marginal cost curve above the minimum of the average variable cost is a firm's supply curve. So in this market, the supply curve is the monopoly's marginal cost. That demand curve, of course, is not just demand, it's average revenue and price. And to make this a monopoly, we're going to throw in a marginal revenue curve that is below the demand. Next, we can find our profit maximizing quantity where marginal revenue equals marginal cost. And we can find out that the monopoly is going to underproduce this product compared to a perfectly competitive market. And of course, the price is found all the way up there at that demand curve. And so the monopoly is going to charge a higher price and have lower quantities that are produced. Next, let's go over a few other important things that you need to know about a monopoly. Just like you've learned in the past, you can find the areas that are on this graph. If we want to find total revenue from the quantity that's being produced, you go all the way up until you hit the demand curve, the average revenue. Head on over to that price axis. That gives you the average revenue for the quantity produced. Multiply that average revenue by the quantity, and that will give you total revenue. To find the total cost, you're just going to go up until you hit the average total cost curve at the quantity produced, calculate the area of that rectangle, and that would give you the total cost of production for this monopoly. And from the price being charged all the way up to the demand curve, we can find a consumer surplus triangle there, and you can calculate the areas of any of these shapes if there were numbers. Some important quantities you need to know about that you can find on this graph is the socially optimal, also known as allocatively efficient quantity. It's where the demand curve intersects that marginal cost curve. The productively efficient quantity is found where the average total cost curve intersects the marginal cost. That is the lowest possible average cost of production. It's found where the average total cost curve bottoms out, where it's at its minimum, where it intersects that marginal cost curve. You could also be asked to identify the revenue maximizing quantity, and that's found where the marginal revenue curve intersects that price axis. That's because at higher quantities, marginal revenue is going to be negative, and that means total revenue will start to fall. As a result, total revenue is at its maximum when marginal revenue is zero. You could also see questions about a natural monopoly. Now, there are a few different ways to draw a natural monopoly. Here's one of them right here. But the key is that the average total cost curve is going to constantly downward slope through all relevant quantities along the demand curve. And that means that since that average total cost curve is constantly decreasing, no matter what quantity this firm would realistically produce, this firm will always capture economies of scale. A natural monopoly means that a single firm can produce things cheaper and with lower costs than multiple firms. As a result, it's generally going to be more efficient to have one single producer when there's a natural monopoly in this market. And so governments will often regulate natural monopolies, and you will learn about that in a future unit. All right, there you have it. That's everything you need to know about single price monopolies. If you already knew all of that, you're on your way to acing your next AP microeconomics exam. If you still need a little more help, head over to reviewecon.com, where there's lots of games and activities to help you practice the skills you need to know for your next exam. That's it for now. I'll see y'all next time.